Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Only today we're doing a HEMA Drama Breakdown. That's right, you can't get away from it anymore, and neither could I. If your YouTube algorithm looks anything like mine, over the past week you've been noticing videos pop up where people have been responding to a video made by Ramsey in which he dismantles and destroys HEMA, displays them all for everyone to see as the frauds that they are. Except that that's not what happened at all. Ramsey made a very good video, at least in my opinion, about self-defense and calling it a power fantasy. And in that, he dismantled the idea of pressure testing in that specific context. Now, as a good HEMA YouTuber would, they all made them about themselves and about HEMA, where in reality, the video wasn't about HEMA at all. However, I am a HEMA YouTuber, which means I still have a contractual obligation to make this about HEMA somehow, and that's what I'm going to do. Only instead of it being about the pressure testing part of the video, I want to talk about the power fantasy part. See, Ramsey has a take, which I agree with pretty much exclusively, which is that power fantasies and self-defense are completely tied together. Whenever someone tries to sell you the idea of self-defense, they're not selling you techniques, ideas, tactics, or physical fitness. What they're selling you is the belief in yourself that you are now better prepared or immune from the random acts of violence that exist in the modern world. This is, of course, not true. If someone sneaks up on you and shanks you in the prison yard, no amount of self-defense techniques is going to get you out of that one. If someone shoots you randomly on the street when they were behind you, there's nothing you can really do. If people try to mug you, your ability to fight back has very little to do with whether or not you get out of that harmed or unharmed. No, Ramsey calls these all power fantasies, and he does it for a very particular reason. You see, in his mind and in my mind, the ability to prevent something is inexorably tied to the ability to do something. And I think a lot of people sort of conflate the two skills into one in order to justify what are essentially their own internal feelings and beliefs and fantasies about doing violence to other people. Take, for example, the show Euphoria. There's a character in there who's a typical Kyle wall puncher. A little bit sociopathic, but very strong, and obviously very violent. He has these fantasies where he sees himself shooting pedophiles and beating up bullies and all that stuff. And the way it's framed in the show, it's depicted as though obviously he has these instincts and feelings of anger and violence, but he doesn't have a good, safe way to express them. So he kind of packages them in the idea of being a chivalrous white knight for justice, so that he can do the violent things that he really wants to do. And in my mind, this is what Ramsey is talking about when he talks about self-defense. When he talks about it being a power fantasy, what he's essentially saying is that people who sell self-defense aren't really selling you self-defense, they're selling you offense. They're selling you violence. They're selling you the ability to win a fight. Because after all, if you can't win a fight, you can't defend yourself. And that's still true. But how does this pivot to HEMA? Well, the thing is that the reason these places sell self-defense in this way, as a power fantasy, is because it makes a lot of money. It's very profitable. It's essentially a cult recruiting tactic. Because if you bring up a bunch of people who are vulnerable, upset, angry at the world, a couple of Kyle wall punchers, and you tell them that they can do violence safely and ethically without, going to jail, then they're going to be interested. And if you tell them not only that, but that their instincts to do violence are in fact justified, if they simply wrap it up in this different context, well, just like Kyle wall puncher, they're going to feel a little bit better about their rage and their internalized violence. And they're going to pay you a bunch of money to do it. And where HEMA crosslines with this is with their understanding of history. You see, nobody really gets into HEMA to learn self-defense. There's no practicality in learning how to sword fight. But there is an egotistical power fantasy in telling yourself that you know how to sword fight. Not because you can win in a sword fight in real life, but because you could have won in a sword fight in history. And this is where the power fantasy morphs ever so slightly. You see, In HEMA, we don't sell people the power fantasy of, being able to take down a pedophile with a single stroke of your sword. We sell them the idea that they could be transported back into the year 1345 and they'd be the biggest badass around. And that feels good. Not just because you're a badass, but because you're a badass in a time and a place that you have spent a very large amount of your time researching and learning about, and secretly idolizing. You see, a lot of people have some very uncomfortable opinions about history. Historians especially, because as it turns out, in order to learn things about history, you have to spend a lot of time, a lot of money that feels like a complete waste learning about people who are dead, contexts that aren't real anymore, and will never come back. Theoretically, you're learning about this so that you learn a little bit about the human race, the human condition. What was it like under these contextual circumstances? That's important stuff to know. But at the same time, you can't help but get swept up into the tall tales and epic fables of the past. You learn about knights and their shining armor, about how they fought for justice and God, and maybe every once in a while, when you think no one's looking, you let out a little Deus Vult because it feels so good. But what you don't realize is that you're being sold a 500-year-old power fantasy. Those crusaders weren't good people. They didn't fight for justice or God, and they pretty much just did whatever they wanted and profited from it. They're terrible people. They're Kyle wall punchers. And at the end of the day, if we want HEMA to be better than the world of self-defense and martial arts and the McDojos that make immense amounts of profit feeding off of people's vulnerabilities and insecurities, we have to be able to look at our own. We have to be able to look at our own beliefs about violence and say, I don't actually want to be good at a sword fight. I don't care if I am good at a sword fight. I'm only doing this sport because it's good exercise, I like competition, and I like all the people I spend time around. I read about history because I want to learn about people who used to be around and the lives that they led. Not believe every tall tale they tell about themselves, hook, line, and sinker, as some sort of way of connecting myself to badass people that didn't actually exist. If we stop selling power fantasies and start selling reality, we're going to make less money, but we're going to be a little bit more honest about it, and most importantly, we're not going to have any more instances where Ramsey can make a video about self-defense and automatically assume that it was about us. See, I think that's the most embarrassing part, is that so many people listen to Ramsey talk about knife fighting techniques and him to essentially say they're kind of stupid and bullshit, and for immediately several HEMAs to go, my techniques aren't bullshit. They are.
And the last one.
Fiore's dagger defense will not save you in the streets from a knife attacker. It didn't save him in 1345. It wouldn't save you now. It wouldn't save you ever. Because fighting a person with a knife when you don't have one, or even if you do, is stupid. It's shitty. Real self-defense has absolutely nothing to do with being able to win a knife fight. It has to do with a power fantasy. The power fantasy of being able to beat up the tax collector, as Fiore would put it, and shake him down even though he drew a knife on you. It's stupid. It's ridiculous. But more importantly, we have to move past it as a little community. Hopefully, this will help you do that. And if not, well, you probably hit mute in the first 30 seconds and just watch the footage I put in the green screen. Alright, see you next time.